In Venezuela, the National Electoral Council confirmed that 100% of the electoral machines have already been distributed across the country ahead of July 28th elections. President Joe Biden withdrew from the race for the U.S. presidency, a decision that plunges the Democratic nomination into uncertainty just months before the November election. And in Palestine, Israeli occupation forces order a new evacuation of thousands in Han Yunis al-Mawasi town. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Sunday, the president of the National Electoral Council of Venezuela, Elvis Amoroso, confirmed that 100% of the electoral machines have already been distributed across the country. Amoroso said so during the pre-dispatch audit in the venues of the National Electoral Council in the state of Miranda, in the center north of Venezuela. On the preliminary audit, in which witnesses of political organizations attended, authorities verified the correct functioning of the communicational devices. Therefore, the president of the highest electoral body ratified that the stages of the ballot agenda for July 28th elections are being rigorously complied with. And there's less than a week left for the presidential election and only 4 days for campaigning. Candidates increase efforts to get votes, and Maduro finishes off with large rallies in the interior of the country. With more information, our special envoy, Yunus Soner.
Candidate Maduro plans to hold campaign closings in all 23 states of Venezuela. This Sunday, he was in Apure and Barinas in the south of the country. The pillars of his speech are centered on the defense of the public, the renunciation of violence, the defense of democracy, and of the results.
They have said it. We are going to privatize everything: education, housing, the right to health. They said that. They said they are going to fire 400,000 public workers. They bring Milei's chainsaw with them. Do you want Venezuela to become Milei's Argentina?
He is referring to the extremist sector headed by candidate Edmundo González. González participated briefly in a religious act in Caracas and called to vote through a message on social networks.
We're 1 week away from the most important day in the democratic history of our country. On that day, with your vote, we will begin the path of reconciliation for all Venezuelans.
The candidate of the Solutions Party, Claudio Fermin, said that the votes do not belong to any fraction and that he stands as an independent of the political blocs.
But voters are nobody's property. I respectfully tell the voters, the electors, whoever they have voted for in the past, that it is time for a change.
The leader of the Pencil Party, Antonio Ecari, made a campaign closing in the state of Aragua and called to not follow the polarization, instead voting for his candidacy of unity.
If you want to have Venezuela divided, go and vote for one of the extremes. There is the PSUV option and there is the MUD option. But if you want to have a united Venezuela and you want to have your children back, here's the pencil of education.
José Brito, candidate of Venezuela First, showed activity in his social networks calling to vote in peace. The standard bearer of Democratic Action, Luis Eduardo Martinez, closed his campaign in the state of Lara. There are 4 days of campaigning and less than a week left for the presidential elections in Venezuela.
In this context, the candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, continued his tour across the whole Venezuelan Nueva Esparta state as part of his presidential campaign. There he was welcomed by a large gathering that ratified the people's support to his governmental upcoming proposals. In that regard, Maduro thanked the people for their backup during the development of his electoral campaign that ends up next July 25th.
Commander Chavez, Commander, this people will not fail you. We are heading towards a great victory next Sunday, July 28th, and we will pass all the bills to that racist oligarchy of Caracas. We will pass the bill of the sanctions. We will pass the bill of the blockade. We will pass the bill of the economic war. We will pass the bill of the today dollar. We will pass them the bill of the U.S. invasion call. We will pass them all the bills.
At the gathering of the Nueva Esparta state, the candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, demanded the far right to stop taking violent actions against the country.
But I say it to the far right wing now. I say it from now on to the far right: if you overstep the line, before, during or after July 28th, listen to me carefully because I do not speak nonsense, you will regret it for 200 years. It will be the last mistake the far right will make to harm the people. Enough of harm, enough of violence, enough of selling their country, enough of selling their country. It's enough, darn it.
During his speech, candidate Maduro also expressed his confidence in the Venezuelan people ahead of the presidential elections of July 28th.
Is not far away, the most important victory of, let me tell you, the 21st century. The 21st century will be written before and after July 28th. It is not by chance that that day, our commander Hugo Chavez turns 70 years old. It is a date with the history of the hereafter and beyond. It is a date with the earthly and the supernatural. It is a date with the history of 500 years of resistance, of 200 years of independence.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. President Joe Biden withdrew from the race for the U.S. presidency, a decision that plunges the Democratic nomination into uncertainty just months before the November election against Donald Trump. The president made the announcement after a weeks-long pressure campaign by Democratic leaders, organizers, and donors. A disastrous debate performance last month and his uneven public appearances since have only exacerbated long-standing voter concerns that the 81-year-old president was simply too old to serve another 4 years. The president's withdrawal pushes the Democratic Party into largely uncharted waters, with its national convention scheduled to begin on August 19th in Chicago. The nominee will also have a tight window to choose a running mate to take on Trump and his vice presidential pick, the Ohio Senator James David Vance. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson called for Joe Biden's resignation following his decision to withdraw from the 2024 presidential race just months before the election. Johnson reasoned that if Joe Biden is unfit to run for the presidency, he is unfit to serve. He also launched strong criticism against the Democratic Party and Vice President Kamala Harris, who, according to him, has known as long as anyone of his inability to serve and whom accused of being complicit in the greatest political cover-up in the history of the country, as well as in the destruction of national sovereignty, security, and prosperity. Johnson said the Democratic Party forced the Democratic nominee to withdraw his candidacy from the ballot with just over 100 days to go before the elections. On Sunday, in an exclusive interview for our multi-platform teleSUR, the leader of the social movement Bridges of Love, Carlos Lasso, gave details about Joe Biden's resignation from his presidential candidacy.
Many people in the political environment of the United States expected that maybe Biden would withdraw, because after the failed performance in the debate with Trump, it was bad news and bad news. The fact that today he announced his withdrawal from the campaign to support Kamala Harris creates a new dynamic in the United States, and towards the elections, there was a lot of pessimism among the Democrats because there was little chance that Biden would win the elections. Especially in the most important states, these states that are decisive for the presidency. And the fact that he is now withdrawing, and the possible presidential candidate Kamala Harris, gives a lot of hope to the Democrats and too many forces that are opposed to President Trump here in the United States.
In the meantime, Carlos Lasso pointed out that the polls were not favorable for the President Biden.
Biden received overwhelming support from African American women and African Americans overall, at this moment, according to the polls. There is some discouragement among these people, and it is not that maybe they are not going to vote or were going to vote against Biden, but that they were not encouraged to vote for Biden. They thought it was not worth it to go out and vote for Biden. However, when the same polls were made to these people about Kamala Harris, there was more enthusiasm, there was more intention to vote. So I think that in this sense, we can gather a part of this alliance, that is the Democrats. This front, that is created by the Democrats of African Americans, Hispanics, migrants from different sectors, and it can have an impact on minorities, and also on the population in general for this ground, for this idea of an African American woman to be the first president of the United States.
During his campaign in various states, presidential candidate Nicolás Maduro sent a message to President Joe Biden after the news of his withdrawal from the race for the U.S. presidency.
Yo solamente le digo, Presidente Biden.
I only say to President Biden, be at peace with your conscience because you made the wise and correct decision. And from Venezuela, I, the President of the Republic, wish you good health and long life, President Biden, despite our differences.
On the other hand, former U.S. President Barack Obama expressed on his X account that Biden was one of the U.S. most consequential presidents and that he is a patriot of the highest order. Former U.S. President Clinton, along with former State Secretary Hillary Clinton, thanked President Biden for everything he achieved and supported Kamala Harris. Politician and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer described Biden as a truly amazing human being, agreeing on the fact that he put his country and everyone's future first. For his part, Donald Trump let everybody know all the suffering Biden's presidency brought to the United States. Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova expressed on her X account that the next step after Biden's withdrawal should be an investigation into the conclusion of the U.S. into the collusion of the U.S. media and political circles. On Monday, the Israeli occupation army ordered a new evacuation of thousands of Gazans from their lands. In this way, soldiers, on behalf of the genocidal regime of Tel Aviv, ordered the inhabitants of Han Yunis to temporarily evacuate the humanitarian area of Mawasi. For its part, the Zionist army also warned that the new exodus should be carried out immediately, alleging that numerous terrorist acts perpetrated by the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, have taken place in these areas. On the other hand, it was also known that in the last hours, Israel bombed more than 35 targets in the region, leaving many dead and wounded. Meanwhile, on Sunday, the United Nations Population Fund issued a stern warning about the growing malnutrition crisis in Gaza, which poses a grave danger to pregnant women and newborns. In this recent publication on the social media X, the UNFPA noted that the birth of premature and low birth weight babies in Gaza has become increasingly common. Local authorities report that since the start of the current conflict on October 7th, the number of Palestinians killed has risen to more than 38,000, with more than 89,000 wounded, most of them women and children. The government media office in Gaza confirmed that at least 34 children have died of starvation and over 3,500 are at imminent risk due to malnutrition. And in Bangladesh, Metropolitan Police confirmed more than 500 people arrested since protests began last week. According to the police spokesman, there are currently 532 preventively detained people. In addition to the students, several social leaders, including Ami Kashrun Mahmood, have also been arrested. Despite the decision of the Supreme Court that reversed the controversial law that triggered the protests, the detainees have not yet been released. On Sunday, Philippine and Chinese authorities report that they have reached an agreement to ease tensions on a disputed sandbar in the South China Sea. Authorities of these Asian countries report that this interim agreement is intended to reduce tensions after a series of provocations at the Second Thomas Sandbank, which both nations claim to be relevant. The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs stated that both sides continue to recognize the need to ease the situation in the South China Sea and manage differences through dialogue and consultation. Diplomats from both nations set out the tentative terms of the agreement that will re-establish Philippine troops on the Second Thomas Sandbar, where their forces have periodically clashed. We have a fun short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly, share the link to reach more people, constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Mexico, a new caravan of migrants from several Latin American and Caribbean countries began its journey to the United States. The call was released on social media by the members themselves. The contingent concentrated in Chiapas and headed along the international highway to Tapachula. The caravan passed at least 2 inspection points of the Mexican National Migration Institute and the National Guard without any attempt to stop them. According to the migrants themselves, they intend to reach the city of Tapachula, where they hope that more migrants stranded on the southern border will join them in order to continue as a group towards the center and north of Mexico. Colombian President Gustavo Petro proposed to Congress to approve the reduction of the working day to 40 hours a week in order to increase productivity levels in the country. The president described as semi-slavery the current situation in the country with working hours of 48 hours per week and pointed out that it is a huge mistake to think that the more workers are exploited with long working hours, instability and low wages, the more business profits are made. The Colombian president considered it essential to reach a labor management pact to raise real wages and reduce the working day. Petro did not specify if the proposal to reduce the working day will be translated into a new bill or if, on the contrary, it will be added to the labor reform that is being processed in Congress. On Sunday, in the northwest of Colombia, 3 people lost their lives during the 40th massacre in the country in 2024. The incident took place early Sunday morning in La Granja neighborhood in the municipality of Cocorna, Antioquia. According to local media, the fatal victims were 3 men between the ages of 17 and 31. The mayor of Cocorna, David Gomez, assured that no effort should be spared and that all actions should be multiplied to find the whereabouts of the perpetrators of this extremely violent act. Local authorities are on alert as 2 massacres have been recorded in less than 48 hours. In response to both incidents, this Monday will be held a security council led by department officials and all law enforcement agencies. In Chile, the National Congress, after a week's recess, resumes its activities with a full agenda where the focus will be on projects to address the violence crisis in the country. Issues such as the creation of the Ministry of Public Security, the Economic and Financial Intelligence System, the Critical Infrastructure Project, and the plan to build a high-security prison will be debated by legislators in the coming days. A commission of the Chamber of Deputies will summon the Minister of Justice, Luis Cordero, to explain details about the prison with a capacity of 500 inmates where organized crime leaders will be held. Insecurity returned to the forefront after 2 recent killings in Santiago that left 9 people dead. In Indonesia, thousands gather in the streets of the city of Pariaman to celebrate the Tabuik festival. On Sunday, thousands flocked to a coastal town in western Indonesia to watch a clash between ornate mythical effigies before casting them into the sea, in an old ritual born from a Shiite holiday of mourning. Dozens of men paraded the effigies across the town of Pariaman, stopping traffic in the city center with the beginning of the Tabuik festival. The origins of the festival were brought to western Indonesia by Shiite Muslims soldiers from India under British rule in the 19th century. The ritual dramatizes the abstract battle of Karbala in modern-day Iraq, where Imam Hussein and his retinue were killed by a larger army. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.